Mira pressed her palm against the cool surface of her workstation, watching the holographic star map rotate slowly in front of her. The orbital station Nexus Prime hummed quietly around her as she worked through another night shift in the cartography department. Her job was simple: update the galactic maps with new survey data and keep the shipping routes current. But tonight something was wrong with the data. She had been a mapmaker for 15 years, ever since graduating from the Altarian Academy with top honors. In all that time she had never seen anything like this. Every trade route, every exploration path, every military patrol seemed to bend around one specific area of space like water flowing around a stone. The region was called Sector 7 Alpha in the official databases. Whenever she pulled up information about it, the same warnings appeared over and over: navigation difficulties, hazardous conditions, extreme caution advised, and recommended avoidance zone. But the warnings never explained what exactly made the area dangerous. Mira leaned back in her chair and rubbed her tired eyes. As an Altarian, she had better vision than most species, especially in low-light conditions. Her purple skin helped her blend into the shadows of deep space, and her flexible tentacle-like fingers could work multiple controls at once. These traits had made her people excellent navigators and explorers for thousands of years. She called up the historical records and started digging deeper. What she found made her stomach twist with unease. The last official survey mission to Sector 7 Alpha had been launched over 200 years ago. The expedition ship, commanded by Captain Vex Thalion, had simply disappeared. No distress signals, no debris field, no trace of what had happened to the crew of 47 beings. Even stranger, preliminary scans of the region showed it contained dozens of star systems with the right conditions for life. The spectral analysis suggested planets with breathable atmospheres, liquid water, and valuable mineral deposits. By all rights, it should have been one of the most contested and developed areas in the galaxy. So why did everyone avoid it? Mira pulled up the shipping manifest from the last 50 years. Thousands of cargo vessels had traveled past the borders of Sector 7 Alpha, but not a single one had entered the region. Even the most desperate smugglers and pirates seemed to give it a wide berth. She expanded her search to include military records. The Galactic Defense Force regularly patrolled the space around Sector 7 Alpha, but their routes always stopped at an invisible boundary line. When she looked at the patrol reports, she found notes like routine patrol completed without incident, and no unusual activity detected along perimeter, but never any mention of actually entering the restricted zone. The more she dug, the more questions arose. How could an entire sector of space remain unexplored in an age when every asteroid and gas cloud had been mapped and catalogued? The galaxy was constantly expanding, with new colonies being established every year. Every faction, from the massive trade consortium to the smallest independent worlds, was always looking for new resources and territory. But apparently not in Sector 7 Alpha. Mira called up her personal files and started making notes. As a cartographer, she was trained to think logically about space and navigation. There had to be a scientific explanation for this pattern. Maybe the region contained unstable stars or dangerous gravitational anomalies. Perhaps there were natural phenomena that made faster-than-light travel impossible in that area. But if that were true, why wouldn't the warnings be more specific? Why keep the nature of the danger secret? She tried accessing higher-level security databases, using her clearance as a senior cartographer. Most of the files were above her authorization level, but she managed to find a few fragmentary reports. One mentioned unusual energy readings detected by long-range sensors. Another talked about communication difficulties experienced by ships that had approached the region's borders. The most interesting file she found was a psychological evaluation report from 30 years ago. It described a cargo ship captain who claimed his vessel had been pulled into Sector 7 Alpha by some kind of gravitational effect. According to the report, the captain insisted he had encountered beings of impossible nature, who had shown him wonders beyond galactic understanding. The evaluation concluded that the captain was suffering from severe space psychosis and recommended immediate medical treatment. A note at the bottom mentioned that the entire crew had requested memory modification therapy to deal with traumatic experiences they claimed to have had during their time in the restricted zone. Mira sat back in her chair, feeling a chill run through her body. Memory modification was an extreme treatment, usually reserved for torture victims or beings who had witnessed unspeakable horrors. What could have happened to that crew to make them want to forget their own experiences? She looked at the star map again, focusing on the empty space where Sector 7 Alpha should have been bustling with activity. For the first time in her career, she found herself staring at a region of the galaxy that truly lived up to the old spacer saying, Here be dragons. The question was, what kind of dragons were hiding in that darkness between the stars? And why was the entire galactic community apparently content to pretend they didn't exist? Mira saved her research files and began planning her next move. As a scientist, she knew that unexplored mysteries were meant to be investigated, not avoided. But as she prepared to dig deeper into the secrets of Sector 7 Alpha, she couldn't shake the feeling that some knowledge might be too dangerous to possess. 3 weeks after her discovery, Mira found herself in a part of Nexus Prime she had never visited before. The lower levels of the station were dark and crowded, filled with the kind of people who made their living in the shadows between official channels. The air smelled of exotic spices, engine oil, and something she couldn't identify but didn't want to think about too hard. She had spent days trying to find more information through proper channels, but every database search led to dead ends or classified files. Her supervisor had even pulled her aside to suggest she focus on more productive research topics. That conversation had convinced her that answers wouldn't come from official sources. The Void's Edge Cantina sat wedged between a black market tech shop and a questionable medical clinic. Inside, the lighting was deliberately dim and conversations happened in whispers. Mira felt completely out of place in her clean research uniform, but she forced herself to walk to the bar and order a drink. "You look lost, mapmaker," said a rough voice beside her. Mira turned to see a Thrillian with half his face replaced by cybernetic implants. His remaining organic eyes studied her with sharp intelligence, while sensors glowed softly where his left eye should have been. Deep scars covered his scaled hands, and his clothes had the worn look of someone who spent more time in space than on stations. "How did you know what I do?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Word travels fast down here. Especially when someone from the upper levels starts asking questions about places they shouldn't." He extended a scarred hand. "Name's Dex. I hear you've been poking around Sector 7 Alpha." Mira felt her heart skip. "I'm just doing research for updated navigation charts." Dex laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Research? Right. Let me guess, you found all those convenient warning labels but no actual explanations. You're wondering why the entire galaxy treats that region like it's radioactive. Can you tell me?" Dex was quiet for a long moment, staring into his drink. Around them, other conversations continued in low voices, but Mira noticed that nobody sat too close to their section of the bar. 30 years ago, I was running cargo between the Outer Rim colonies," Dex finally said. "Good money, minimal questions asked. My ship was called the Iron Wind, and she was fast enough to outrun most patrol vessels." He took a long drink before continuing. "We were making a delivery run when our navigation system malfunctioned. Instead of dropping out of hyperspace at our planned coordinates, we got pulled into Sector 7 Alpha by some kind of gravitational effect. At first, we thought it was just a natural anomaly." Mira leaned closer. "What did you find there?" "Structures. Massive things floating in the empty space between stars. They weren't ships exactly, more like living buildings that grew instead of being built. And the beings that controlled them." Dex shuddered. "They called themselves humans. Said they were protecting something they called the Garden." Humans? Mira had never heard of such a species in any galactic database. That's what they called themselves. But they weren't like any life form in the official records. Sometimes they looked like individual creatures with 2 arms and 2 legs. Other times they seemed to exist as pure energy speaking directly into our minds. And sometimes they appeared to be distributed across their technology, like their consciousness was spread throughout their ships. Dex's cybernetic eye dimmed as he accessed old memory files. They didn't threaten us or demand anything. They just evaluated us, like we were specimens they were studying. They asked us questions about our society, our technology, our goals. And when we answered, they seemed sad about something. "What happened to your crew?" "That's the strange part. I don't really remember most of it. None of us do. We have fragments, images of impossible technologies, voices that spoke in harmonics our ears weren't designed to hear, and the feeling that we were being judged by standards we couldn't understand." Mira noticed that Dex's hands were shaking slightly as he spoke. "When we finally left, they gave us a choice. We could remember everything we had seen or we could choose to forget. Most of my crew chose the memory modification. But you didn't?" "I kept just enough to remember that some knowledge is too dangerous to carry around. The humans aren't conquerors or traitors or anything we understand. They're something else entirely. Gardeners, they call themselves. And the rest of us are apparently the weeds they've decided to let grow." Around the cantina, Mira noticed that other patrons were listening despite pretending not to. When she looked directly at them, they quickly turned away or started talking about other things. Are there others who've been there? She asked. Dex nodded toward a table in the corner where three beings sat in uncomfortable silence. Kara over there claims her exploration ship got pulled in 15 years ago. Won't talk about what she saw, but she hasn't taken a job that goes anywhere near that sector since. An old Vex at the end of the bar was part of a salvage crew that found a derelict ship drifting at the edge of 7 Alpha. Empty crew quarters, but the cargo hold was filled with technology that made no sense. What kind of technology? The kind that gets confiscated by government agents who don't officially exist, Dex said. Look, Mapmaker, I'm telling you this because you seem like someone who deserves to know what you're getting into. That region isn't marked as dangerous because of radiation or unstable stars. It's dangerous because the beings who live there have the power to change how you think about reality itself. He finished his drink and stood up. My advice? Update your charts with bigger warning signs and find a different research project. Some mysteries are meant to stay mysterious. As Dex walked away, Mira sat alone at the bar, processing what she had learned. The other patrons gradually returned to their conversations, but she caught fragments of whispered words. The garden, memory modification, beings that shouldn't exist. She ordered another drink and started planning her next move, knowing that despite every warning she was going to find a way to see Sector 7 Alpha for herself. 2 weeks later, Mira stood on the bridge of the research vessel Stellar Cartographer, watching the stars shift as they approached the boundary of Sector 7 Alpha. She had convinced 3 colleagues to join her unauthorized expedition by promising them a chance to make the greatest scientific discovery of their careers. Now, as they drew closer to the forbidden region, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Kira, her young research assistant, monitored the sensor arrays with nervous excitement. At only 23 years old, she had graduated top of her class and jumped at the chance for real exploration. Her enthusiasm helped balance the worry that showed on everyone else's faces. Dr. June, their xenobiologist, had initially refused to join the mission. Only his scientific curiosity had finally convinced him to come along, though he spent most of the journey reviewing emergency procedures and escape routes. His expertise in alien life forms made him essential, but his constant anxiety was starting to affect the whole crew. Bay, their pilot, was the most practical member of the team. She had 20 years of experience flying research ships through dangerous regions of space, but even she seemed tense as they approached their destination. Her hands moved constantly over the navigation controls, ready to jump to hyperspace at the first sign of trouble. Crossing into Sector 7 Alpha in 30 seconds, Bay announced, her voice carefully controlled. All systems showing normal readings. Whatever's in there, it's not broadcasting any obvious warnings. The transition was subtle at first. Their instruments began picking up energy patterns that didn't match anything in their databases. The gravity sensors showed readings that made no sense according to standard physics. Space itself seemed to bend in ways that their equipment couldn't properly measure. Are you seeing this? Kira called out, her voice filled with wonder. These energy signatures are completely unknown. It's like the laws of physics work differently here. Dr. June looked up from his biology scanners, his face pale. The quantum readings suggest we're not just dealing with advanced technology. We're looking at something that operates on completely different principles than anything we've studied. As they moved deeper into the sector, their sensors detected something massive ahead. At first, it appeared on their screens as a simple energy reading, but as they got closer, the object began to take shape. It was enormous, larger than any space station they had ever seen, but it didn't look like it had been built by conventional methods. It's organic, Kira whispered, staring at the readings. The structure is grown, not constructed. Like a living building floating in space. Before anyone could respond, their ship began to vibrate gently. It wasn't an impact or engine trouble, more like a musical note that resonated through the hull. Then their view screen shimmered, and they found themselves looking at something that challenged everything they thought they knew about life in the galaxy. The beings that appeared on their screen didn't look like any species in the galactic databases. Sometimes they seemed to be individual creatures with 2 arms and 2 legs, covered in soft-looking skin. Other times they appeared as flowing energy that moved through their organic ships like blood through veins. Most disturbing of all, they occasionally existed as pure information, speaking directly through the ship's computer systems. We greet you, children of the outer reaches, a voice said, though it didn't come through their communication equipment. Instead, the words formed directly in their minds, gentle but impossible to ignore. You seek knowledge of this place. We offer understanding, though it comes with great responsibility. Mira found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. We're explorers. Scientists. We mean no harm to anyone. Harm is not our concern, the entity replied. The image on their screen shifted between individual and collective forms as it spoke. Intent is what matters. You seek to map what you find here to catalog and classify our domain. But some gardens must remain undisturbed for the seeds within to grow properly. Dr. June leaned forward, his scientific training overcoming his fear. Gardens? Are you saying this region is some kind of preserve? In a manner of speaking, yes. We are the beings your people call humans, though that word carries meanings in your languages that do not fully capture what we have become. We have appointed ourselves as guardians of young civilizations that require protection to develop naturally. Kira's hands moved over her sensor controls, recording everything they could detect. Protection from what? From premature contact with galactic civilization, the human entity explained. Your people and others like them mean well when they encounter developing species. You offer technology, knowledge, cultural exchange. But such gifts often prevent young civilizations from discovering their own unique paths to understanding. Bay kept her hands near the navigation controls, ready to escape if necessary. How many worlds are you protecting? Within this sector, there are currently 437 worlds hosting developing civilizations. Some have only recently discovered fire. Others are beginning to explore their own solar systems. A few are on the verge of achieving faster-than-light travel. The magnitude of what they were hearing struck the crew silent. An entire hidden section of the galaxy, filled with developing civilizations that the rest of the universe knew nothing about. You're keeping them isolated, Mira said, finally understanding. That's why this region is off-limits. We are giving them the gift that we ourselves received, the opportunity to grow without outside interference. Each species must be allowed to develop its own unique perspective on existence, consciousness, and technology. Too often, contact with established galactic culture causes promising civilizations to lose their distinctive characteristics. Dr. June was practically vibrating with excitement and terror. But the knowledge we could share, the advancement we could offer them, would rob them of their own journey of discovery, the human interrupted gently. Tell us, Dr. June, what would your own species have become if, at the moment your people first looked up at the stars, a more advanced civilization had arrived and handed you all the answers? The question hung in the air as the crew realized they were face to face with beings who had redefined the very concept of first contact. The human entity guided their ship through space in a way that defied everything Mira knew about navigation. They didn't use engines or propulsion systems that she could detect. Instead, space itself seemed to bend around them, carrying the stellar cartographer forward like a leaf on an invisible current. We will show you what we protect, the human said, its form shifting between individual and collective consciousness as it spoke. But understand that what you see carries the weight of responsibility. Knowledge of the garden worlds cannot be shared carelessly. Their view screen filled with images that took Myra's breath away. The first world appeared as a blue and green sphere hanging in space, its surface covered with oceans and continents. But as their sensors focused on the planet's surface, they could see that this wasn't an empty world waiting for colonization. The Keth people discovered fire only 300 years ago, the human explained. They are beginning to develop agriculture and simple tools. In perhaps 2,000 years, they may reach for the stars. Kira watched the sensor readings with wonder. They're so young. Like children taking their first steps. The image shifted to show primitive settlements scattered across the planet's surface. The beings below looked nothing like any known galactic species, tall and thin with 4 arms and skin that changed color with their emotions. They were building simple structures from stone and wood, creating art on cave walls, and developing what appeared to be early forms of written language. Each species develops according to its own unique nature, the human continued. The Keth will likely excel at multitasking and emotional communication because of their physical characteristics. These traits will shape their technology and culture in ways that would be lost if we introduced them to standard galactic solutions. The view screen changed to show another world, this one covered in vast cities connected by gleaming transportation networks. Dr. June leaned forward, studying the readings from his biology scanners. This species is more advanced, he observed. Early industrial development, but their technology seems to follow completely different principles than ours. The Miran people evolved in a world with intense electromagnetic fields, the human explained. They developed technology based on biological conductivity rather than mechanical engineering. Their cities are grown rather than built, and their transportation systems use living organisms that can manipulate electromagnetic currents. Bay studied the navigation data with professional interest. How long have they been developing this way? Approximately 8,000 years. They will likely achieve space flight within the next 5 centuries, but their approach to stellar travel will be unlike anything currently known to galactic civilization. They may develop ships that are essentially living creatures, capable of reproducing and evolving during long journeys. The images continued to shift, showing world after world filled with developing civilizations. Some were barely beyond the Stone Age, while others had achieved remarkable technological sophistication while following paths completely unknown to galactic science. One world showed a species that had developed advanced mathematics and astronomy without ever discovering metallurgy. Their entire civilization was built from organic materials, but they had created calculation devices that could predict stellar movements with incredible accuracy. Another planet hosted beings that existed partially in what appeared to be another dimension. They had developed technology that allowed them to manipulate space and time in small ways, creating pockets where they could store vast amounts of matter in tiny areas. Each of these civilizations represents a unique solution to the challenges of existence, the human entity explained. If they had encountered galactic civilization during their early development, they would likely have adopted standard technologies and lost their distinctive approaches forever. Mira felt overwhelmed by the scope of what she was seeing. How do you protect so many worlds? How do you keep other species from accidentally discovering them? We have developed monitoring systems that can detect approaching vessels from great distances. Most ships are gently redirected away from protected systems through gravitational adjustments that feel like natural phenomena. The few that penetrate deeper into our territory are offered the same choice you will soon face. Kira looked up from her recordings. What about species that refuse to leave the protected worlds alone? The human's form solidified into something more individual, and for a moment, Mira caught a glimpse of what these beings might have been like before they became whatever they were now. We have defensive capabilities that can protect entire star systems from any threat. But force is our last option. We prefer to help visitors understand why preservation is necessary. Dr. June was taking notes frantically, trying to process the biological implications of what they were seeing. Your own species, the humans. How did you develop these abilities? Are you originally from this sector? We were once much like the species we now protect. Young, curious, developing in isolation on a single world. Our unique perspective on consciousness and technology comes from having no external reference point to limit our growth. We learn to see beyond the boundaries that most species accept as fundamental laws of reality. And now you use those abilities to protect others, Bay said quietly. We use them to ensure that other species have the same opportunity we had to grow and develop without interference, to discover their own solutions to the mysteries of existence, to become something truly unique rather than copies of what already exists. The view screen showed one final image, a star map of the entire sector, with hundreds of glowing points representing protected worlds. Each point pulsed with its own rhythm, like a vast heartbeat spread across space. This is our garden, the human said. And every civilization within it represents potential that could be lost forever if the galaxy discovered them too soon. Mira realized that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, an entire advanced civilization that had chosen protection over expansion, preservation over conquest. What happens to us now? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Now you must choose what to do with the knowledge you have gained. The human entity led them to a quiet chamber within the massive organic structure, where the walls seemed to pulse gently with a soft, living light. Mira and her team sat in chairs that had grown from the floor to accommodate their different body types, while their host took a form that appeared more solid and individual than before. You have seen the garden worlds, the human said, its voice now coming from a mouth rather than directly into their minds. You understand what we protect and why. Now you must decide what to do with this knowledge. Dr. June leaned forward eagerly. This is the greatest discovery in galactic history. The scientific community needs to know about these developing civilizations. We could learn so much from studying their unique evolutionary paths. And in doing so, you would destroy what makes them unique, the human replied gently. Once the galaxy knows these worlds exist, how long do you think it would take before exploration ships, trade missions, and cultural exchange programs arrive? How long before well-meaning scientists want to study them, or governments want to establish relations with them? Kira was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had learned. Other expeditions have been here before. What happened to them? Each group faced the same choice you now face. Some chose to remember everything and became our allies, helping to maintain the necessary secrecy through their positions in various organizations. They live with the knowledge but understand its weight. Others chose to have their memories modified, keeping only the understanding that this region should be avoided. Bei looked troubled. Memory modification? You're talking about changing our minds? We're talking about giving you the option to forget what would be a burden too heavy for most beings to carry, the human explained. Consider this: if you return to your civilization with full knowledge of what exists here, you will spend the rest of your lives knowing that hundreds of young civilizations depend on the galaxy's ignorance for their survival. Every decision you make, every report you file, every conversation you have will carry the weight of their future. Mira understood the implications immediately. People would notice changes in our behavior. They would investigate. Exactly. And even if you managed to keep the secret perfectly, you would live with the constant stress of knowing that one mistake could expose 400 developing worlds to premature contact. Some of our previous visitors found that burden unbearable. The team spent hours discussing their options. Dr. June argued passionately that the knowledge was too valuable to lose, that there had to be a way to study the protected civilizations without interfering with their development. Bei worried about the psychological effects of carrying such an enormous secret. Kira asked practical questions about how memory modification worked and whether it could be reversed. The process is precise, the human assured them. We can remove specific memories while leaving your general experiences intact. You would remember visiting this sector and concluding that it should remain off-limits, but the details of why would fade like a dream you can't quite recall. What about our research data? Kira asked. All the sensor readings and recordings we've made? That information would be modified as well. Your ship's computers would show that you encountered dangerous spatial anomalies and energy fields that make the region unsuitable for exploration or colonization. Mira found herself facing the most difficult decision of her career. As a scientist, every instinct told her to preserve the knowledge they had gained. But as she thought about the young civilizations they had observed, species taking their first steps toward understanding the universe, she realized that protecting them might be more important than advancing galactic science. I want to ask something, she said finally. If I choose to remember, would I be able to help you protect these worlds? The human nodded. We always need allies in positions where they can influence exploration policies and redirect attention away from protected regions. But it would mean living a double life, always guarding your words and actions. And if I choose to forget? You would return to your work with the instinctive understanding that Sector 7 Alpha requires protection, though you wouldn't remember the specific reasons. You would continue updating navigation charts with warnings that keep ships away from our territory. Each team member made their decision privately, speaking quietly with the human entity while the others waited. When it was Myra's turn, she found herself thinking about her responsibility as a cartographer, to map safe paths through space and warn travelers away from danger. I want to remember enough to do my job properly, she said finally. But not so much that I become a risk to what you're protecting. Can you adjust my memory so that I understand the importance of keeping this region restricted, while letting the specific details fade? The human smiled, an expression that seemed to convey both approval and sadness. Wisdom often lies in knowing what not to know. We can arrange for you to retain the understanding that Sector 7 Alpha requires protection, while allowing the reasons to become unclear over time. The modification process was gentle and painless, like falling asleep and waking with the memory of a vivid dream that slipped away even as you tried to hold on to it. When Mira opened her eyes, she was back on the bridge of the Stellar Cartographer, approaching the boundary of Sector 7 Alpha. 2 months later, Mira sat at her workstation on Nexus Prime, updating the galactic navigation charts. Kira handed her the latest survey data, and mentioned that the Confederation Council was asking about the navigation restrictions around Sector 7 Alpha. Add additional warning markers to all approach routes, Mira instructed, surprised by her own certainty. Some regions of space are meant to remain undisturbed. As she worked, she felt a deep satisfaction knowing she was protecting something important, though she couldn't quite remember what. Outside the observation ports, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere among them, young civilizations continued their journey toward the stars, free to discover their own unique paths through the cosmos.